Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, even though he just introduced me, I'm Julie, John's daughter. So, but I want to say thank you for coming and paying respects as we honor my father's life. Being his daughter and only blood relative, I have to think that I probably know Dad better than anybody and have had the longest ongoing relationship with him, even though there are several here that know him before I was even born. My goals in doing this was to honor Dad, to bring some healing for me and maybe others here, and to possibly share an insight of my dad of who he really was. In the short time he's been gone, one common thing I've heard from those who knew him, no matter if it was years ago or recent, Dad was well liked and known by many of you for his crazy humor, and he used to make you smile. Now, don't get me wrong, being his child, there haven't been times he didn't make me smile, even though I can brag, I was a pretty darn good kid. Dad has certainly had an interesting but private life. Some of that privacy is due to being a private person, but mostly his early years came with great uncertainty and unknowns. Dad was an orphan who eventually was adopted, with the fact that his parents passed away before I arrived, and these things were hard for Dad to talk about. The only person I could ask as I was writing this was my mother. They were married for over 20 years, and even though Mom doesn't have the answers, we know that Dad was slightly rebellious and left home at a young age. What age? Nobody knows. For those that know me well, you know I tend to overthink and overanalyze. I've come up with several theories about my dad. I do know he loved me, but now, at the age of 45, there were many times in my teen and adult years I did often wonder, and not because of that know-it-all teenage phase, but when I wasn't always the most lovable. But with being an orphan, and then for whatever reason causing him to leave home very young, I don't think Dad ever really learned how to show and express love until something very important happened in his life that I'll share later. So let me basically get to the time of my father's life where I have some memories and paint the picture of the real Don Crocker. As you can see, I'm not a girly girl. Often I've wondered if that bothered Dad, because when I was younger, I had the suspicion he really wanted that fancy, frilly, play with dolls, little princess girly girl, and I couldn't be that. I love both my parents, and have drastically different relationships with each one of them. I looked up to my dad, which I think is normal for all little girls, but mine was pretty unique. I remember when I was young, Dad used to lift weights. He might have looked small, but trust me, he was pretty tough. Before we moved to Kansas City, Dad and a buddy of his in Omaha would be in the basement lifting weights. I would go down there and was fascinated at what they could do. On occasions, they would decrease the weight on the bars and let me spot them. I thought that was really cool. With the weight lowered, they knew they had control, but of course, I didn't know that. They would act like they were struggling so that I would jump up and spot them and help them get that bar back up to safety. I think early on it was a secret because Mom probably would have killed him, but eventually she did know. I always pushed for more and wanted to be just like Dad, so eventually they did let me lift weights. I was in awe at how I could flex my muscles and do a giant bench press lift, which honestly was probably nothing more than the bar at the time. What little girl doesn't like that rush, right? Often when Dad lifted weights, he would not have a shirt on. I still looked up to him and wanted to be just like him, so Dad, with his strange sense of humor, would mess with my mind. At that age, I didn't realize that adult men and adult women have differences. As we know, children don't generally see ladies without shirts, so I didn't realize that hairy chest was not a normal thing for women. But I do remember that Dad would tell me as he would put pepper on his food, if you put pepper on your food, you will grow up and you'll put hair on your chest. Mind you, I hated pepper, but I wanted to be just like Dad. So occasionally, I would shake that pepper on my food and suffer while eating it. Still to this day, I only put pepper on just a few items because I still hear it in my head. Like he's sitting right there telling me, it's going to put chest hair on you. I have memories of one Christmas we celebrated at our house in Omaha and invited my mom's family rather than everybody going to early Iowa to my grandparents. In reminiscing the last few days, I have found that I remember this just a bit differently than Mom, but I like my version better. I was at that age when kids start getting bicycles, and you know, the big kid bikes, not those little tight things that you push with your feet. It was when Happy Days was popular, and I was still a very cute kid. I had long, blondish hair, and I almost constantly wore a blue Fonzie shirt. That Christmas, I did get a big kid bike. I think it had training wheels, but I really don't remember. But the thing about that bike, it was pink. My version is that Dad had it custom painted. Mom's version is they bought it pink. But regardless of the version, the one thing he did do is he took it to work, and the guys at the auto shop, they painted my name on the chain guard. So it was personalized, but it was still pink. Dad was so proud of that bike, that stupid pink bike. I broke his heart when I wouldn't ride it for quite some time. We would go out, and he would try to help me learn how to ride, but I purposely failed because I hated that pink bike. I eventually didn't like being the only kid in the neighborhood not out riding, so I sucked it up and I taught myself how to ride that pink bike. Later, after moving to Kansas City, I finally graduated from that pink bike and I got a BMX dirt bike. Little more me, right? At that time, Dad was still into cars. So while he would be washing, waxing, and tinkering with his cars, I would be out there tinkering with my BMX bike. I got to where I could take it all the way down to parts, nuts and bolts and washers, and rebuild it back to all the way again. I've always kind of been proud of that. Around 5th grade or so, Dad transitioned from cars to motorcycles. So we would be in the driveway, instead of working on cars and my bicycle, he'd be working on his motorcycle and my bike. Those were some good times. Dad would even entertain me by letting me go out on rides with him on his giant Harley as I was riding my bicycle. I would puddle my heart out to keep up with him. Obviously, those rides were pretty short, but I enjoyed them. Later, that bike graduated to a moped. I've learned since, there's a big difference between a moped and a scooter. So in reality, it was a 50cc Honda Spree scooter. But those memories are the same, with the exception of, with that Spree, I could keep up with a little longer rides. It wasn't long after that I was a typical teen girl who couldn't even speak to her dad. I mean, yeah, we talked, whatever, but that's when that Mars and Venus teen and parent speak is very different. Even when things we had in common or enjoyed together, it was hard to talk to him. One specific story I can recall, Dad worked at the Chevy dealership in the service department. I had bought my mom's old car from them when Dad decided she needed a new car. I would get service done on my car at Dad's dealership using his employee discount. But since I had a Mazda and he worked at a Chevy dealership, I had to bring certain things with me that aren't compatible, because Mazdas and Chevys are not like Chevy and GMC. So I needed an oil filter, and I was supposed to bring the proper filter. This was the first time really that Dad let me kind of be in charge of getting everything and going out there. Usually he bought everything and I just showed up and they did it and I left. But I kept asking him, what kind of filter do I need? Because if you know Dad, he's pretty particular about cars, motorcycles, and such. So I kept trying to ask him, did he want me to get the orange box or the Fram box, or what brand? But he was stuck on, just look at the auto parts part number, and that'll tell you what to bring. And we argued and argued and argued, and eventually Mom even chimed in trying to help me, but Dad still didn't understand. And that ended with me getting upset and mad and frustrated. And even though many of you probably haven't seen it, but I even cried because I was so mad. But eventually, I think that Dad did that because Dad was Dad. I think it was a game to him, but I still love him anyway. So eventually I became an adult, and Dad went through some major growing up also. As I said earlier, I have always known Dad loves me, but that was something not much said in our home. And while my mom's family dynamics are very different, that side of my family doesn't say or express love very well either. The stuff that I think changed Dad about love, him feeling loved, feeling lovable, as well as expressing and saying those magic words, I love you, I think that was truly God. I don't recall exactly when Dad developed his relationship with God, but I do remember, as Pastor Porter brought it up, when Dad was baptized. And I even remember Dad calling me and being excited, and the tone in his voice I'd never heard before, just to come ask me to come for his baptism. In 1 John 4:7-8, the Bible speaks about knowing God through love. But specifically at the end of verse 8, for God is love. Regardless of religious background, it is often said God is love. I think when God got a hold of Dad, he found love. And with some practice and time, he learned how to love himself and finally express his love. Many seem to think, while Dad and I didn't talk all the time, constantly, that our relationship was strained. I won't try to tell you we didn't have some strained times, but even before God, I knew my Father's love for me. Way back in time, even this week, I often hear people tell me how much Dad loved me, talked about me, and how he was very proud of me. Honestly, that's something I still struggle hard with, but I've learned to receive it a little better. I'm a lot like Dad, and while I do have a relationship with God, I struggle with loving myself, which does make it difficult to give and receive love. I think that's why I used to wonder why Dad couldn't tell me. I've always heard it from his coworkers at the dealership and friends. Thankfully, we have had many heart-to-heart talks, and he did come to be able to finally express directly to me his love. I unfortunately have lost several family over the years, and because I don't have children, my dogs are very important to me, and I have said goodbye to 4 of them so far. As a matter of fact, while Dad spent that month in the hospital this past fall, I had to make the tough decision to say goodbye to one of my beloved dogs. I watched my grandfather slowly demise due to cancer. I watched and was in the ICU with my family as we saw doctors doing everything possible for my aunt until nothing more could be done except to watch the monitors zero out. I watched my grandma, almost like Dad. She was pretty healthy most of her life, but she just got old. She got mild dementia, and when she passed, we believe it was peaceful and in her sleep at home. I have been through this before, and while with some close family, this is really the first time it's been a direct family member, and one where I would be involved in some of the planning that goes on between death and this service. Music has always been important to me, and many times that can be very therapeutic. It is a common saying that music is what feelings sound like. Music is something Dad really got into the last few years as well. One thing that really helped me this week was actually on the way home from the hospital Saturday evening after Dad passed away. When I got into my truck, the song that happened to be playing off of one of the 6 CDs I have was Stephen Curtis Chapman's Jesus Will Meet You There. I've really struggled through some dark times since Dad's heart attack in the fall, and then of course the events that took place in the ICU room Saturday. But this song really spoke to me. I won't share the entire song, but the verses in the chorus that really touched me as I drove home. When you think you've hit rock bottom and the bottom gives way, and you fall into a darkness no words can explain, and you don't know how you're going to make it out alive, Jesus will meet you there. When the doctor says, I'm sorry, we don't know what else to do, and you look at your family wondering how we'll make it through. Whatever road this life takes you down, Jesus will meet you there. He knows the way to wherever you are. He knows the way to the depths of your heart. He knows the way because he's already been where you're going. Jesus will meet you there. So as I close out, I first want to say thank you for letting me share about the man we all know as Don, but I know as Dad. This has been something I wanted to do to honor him, but also as therapy and healing. I appreciate your time in coming today for his service and for letting me speak. My final thing is something Dad was very proud of. He shared it with me shortly before his heart attack in November. He had been writing a few songs. While Dad wasn't very educated, he was a smart man. I was very impressed at all the songs he showed me, but none of them were finished, and there was one that left me speechless. He came up with some very eloquent words to express something very special. Before he went in Thursday for his surgery, he shared with me about he couldn't wait to get home because he really wanted to finish that song and write some music for it. I have been repeatedly told I have a gift for writing. I'm not sure if this is something that someday I could finish for him. I don't know if I would even want it completed. If I did try to finish it, I would need help with writing music. But I don't think anybody but me should finish the words. It wasn't titled, and I don't have a title other than Dad's Song. So please listen as I share one last thing that really is Dawn. Here's Dad's song. I came to Jerusalem and was lost. I heard they took a man called Jesus and nailed him to the cross. They said blood flowed from his side and stained that old tree, and though it seemed he did not know my name, I hear he died for me, convicted of a lifetime of sin. I met a man called Jesus and never been the same since, as he died so I could live. Yes, they say he died, but I know that he lives. Now I just want to see him again, so show me the way to that hill. I can thank him for caring enough that he would take my place, and I could thank him on the hill, thank him for setting me free. Show me to the hill to thank him again, to thank again, thank you again, Lord Jesus.
Very well shared. Thank you very much. And your dad, I'm sure from heaven, can see everything.